Hi guys, welcome to Tactic Apps. By the end of today's tutorial, you should be able to create this kind of user control in WPF using C#. Now before we can proceed, let's take a quick look at the individual elements and the inner workings of this user control. To achieve the visual effect of the UI control, I will start by adding a grid to the template, setting its height and width to 50 pixels. I will then add an ellipse within the grid and set its height and width to 5 pixels. I will also set its border thickness to 2 and its fill property to none. Using the double animation class, I will define an animation and set its duration to 1.2 seconds, and I will set its target value to 50. Now using this animation, I will animate the height and the width of the ellipse back and forth to increase its size. I will also define another double animation and set its target value to 0 and duration to 1.2 seconds. Using this animation, I will animate the opacity of the ellipse to give it a fading effect as it increases in size. Without further ado, let's get to the coding. Okay, now I've already set up a project here, so I'll just go ahead and add in a custom control, and I'll give it a name of Preloader. Great. Now we can see that Visual Studio has added in the class and the resource dictionary that contains our style here. Now apparently in this template we only have a border defined here, so I'll go ahead and replace it with a grid. I'll set the height and the width of the grid to 50. And within the grid, I'll add in an ellipse and set its height and width to 5. I'll give it a stroke thickness of 2 pixels. And I'll set its stroke through a binding. So I won't predefine the stroke, but I'll bind it to another value. So using the template binding, I'll bind it to the border brush. So for me to set this stroke, I'll need to set the border brush, then it will bind it to the stroke. So I'll go back to my main window and I'll add in the control. Now before I can do that, I need to build the solution. Great, the solution was built. Now I'll just go ahead and add in. I'll set the horizontal alignment. I'll change it from the default, which is a stretch. I'll set it to the center so that it can adjust it to 50 by 50. And I'll set the border brush to a shade of orange. Okay. Now if I zoom in, we can now see that the ellipse within our control has a stroke that's orange because it was bound to the border brush. Okay, so these are the basic elements that are needed for this control. What's left is for me to create animations in the code behind. So I'll go to my Preloader class and I'll just get rid of this summary. Before I can do anything, I'll change this access modifier from static to public. This will allow me to access some events within the class. So I'll subscribe to the loaded event, which is here. You can see the lightning bolt icon here. So I'll subscribe to this event. Okay. Now, whenever it's loaded, whenever this UI control is loaded, it will fire this method. So whatever will be inside these brackets will be executed. So I'll go ahead and define an animation. I'll give it a name. This animation will be of the type double animation. I'll just add in the right namespace. I'll give it a name of animation 1. I'll set its target value to 50 and its duration to 1.2 seconds. Okay, so I'll also set some other properties of this animation, which are the repeat behavior. I'll set that to forever so that it keeps on animating. And I'll set the ease in function I'll set it to a new quadratic ease. And I'll set the ease in mode to ease in, ease out. So basically, this is an animation with a target value of 50 and the duration is 1.2 seconds and its repeat behavior to forever, and the ease in function, which is a quadratic ease. So I'll copy and paste this animation and I'll give the second one a name, which is animation 2, and I'll set its target value to 0. And I'll also get rid of the ease in function because I'll be using this animation to animate the opacity of the ellipse that we created. So the first one will be animating the height and the width, and the second one will be animating the opacity. So I'll go back to my resource dictionary here and I'll make sure I give this ellipse a name so that I can access it in the code. I'll give it a name beeper. Now here I'll use the templates function, which is the find name function. So template find name. So this method is used to retrieve an element from the template. So it takes in two arguments, which is the name of the element that you want to retrieve and the parent that is being templated. So I'll just go ahead and put that in. So the name is beeper. And the actual element that has this template is our class here. So I'll use the keyword this. Now, since I know already that the element being returned is an ellipse, I can actually explicitly define it here. So I'll say ellipse, I'll give it a name EP, and I need to cast it here. Okay, so basically this function will return the element with the name beeper. Now we know that this element is an ellipse, so we can actually define it here. So what I'll do now is I'm going to animate this ellipse height and width, and I'll also animate its opacity. So EP begin animation, and I'll animate the height property, and I'll specify which animation I'll be using. So that's animation 1. I'll copy and paste, and this time I'll set the animation property to the width. Okay. Then the other thing that I'll do is I'll animate the opacity. So So I'll just copy paste, and this time I'll set it to the opacity property, and I'll set the animation to 2. So basically that's it for the code here. So we have an animation here that animates the height to a width and height of 50, and the second animation will animate it to 0, so it will keep on fading, and the repeat behavior of these animations is forever. It keeps on playing over and over again. Now I put all this logic within the loaded function here, so whenever our element here has successfully loaded, it will begin animating and creating that visual effect. So apparently my grid is transparent, it doesn't have a background. I was just using that for the sake of the UI bounds. Now I'll go ahead and build, and we'll look at the visual effects taking place. Okay, now we can see here it's being animated, and we are having the beeping effect. So if I want, I can reduce the duration of the animation to make it quicker. So I'll just go ahead and do that. So I can reduce it to maybe 0.8 seconds. Okay, so I'll go ahead and build. And we can now see that the animation becomes a bit quick. So what I'll do is I'll just try to run this, and let's see the result. So guys, that's it. We can see the visual effects here taking place. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.